Coming up on today's episode of The Health Review.
Sadly, in terms of yo-yo dieting, it doesn't just go up, down, up, down, up, down. Each time it goes up, it tends to go a little bit more up. I just know the power of nutrition when it comes to fertility, and I feel that it's only recent years when it's starting to get the airtime. Following a fertility promoting diet and can increase the chances of people getting pregnant and reducing the time it takes to get there.
Where almost 60% of the average person's daily calories are coming from ultra-processed foods, which is quite frightening.
It is a staggering statistic. However, not all UPFs are equal. We need to focus on kind of reducing the ones that have that low nutrient density.
Hello, welcome back to The Health Review. Thank you for joining. And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing all things nutrition and fertility. Very excited for this conversation. We know that we have more nutrition advice than ever before, but arguably, I think we're more confused than ever. And that's been highlighted by a survey which took place in 2023 that said that nearly 60% of adults have been feeling overwhelmed and confused by conflicting nutritional advice. So I'd really love to highlight some of the key areas where perhaps we're feeling more confused. We're also going to do a deep dive into fertility and how nutrition can help you. Some key findings from recent studies shows that women who consumed the highest amount of ultra-processed foods had a 32% lower chance of conceiving naturally. So excited to be getting into this conversation. We are joined by someone I've been wanting to speak to for a long time. It's Ro Huntriss, a London-based dietitian, fertility expert, and chief nutrition officer at Simple App, which is an AI weight loss coach. It has over 17 million downloads globally. It's huge. Ro, thanks for coming on The Health Review.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Equally, I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you too.
Oh, that's lovely. Welcome. And I know that you're one of the busiest women on the planet right now. We were just, before we started recording, saying how you're juggling so many different things, different areas of expertise, which is fascinating. Your job must be so interesting. I saw a post that you did on social media the other day that said that almost 60% of the average person's daily calories are coming from ultra-processed foods, which is quite frightening. How are you feeling about this?
It is a staggering statistic, and yeah, it can be quite frightening when we think about it. But I think we need to kind of like take a step back and think about what it really means. So in terms of ultra-processed foods, we know that there is an association between higher ultra-processed food intake and poorer health outcomes. However, not all UPFs are equal. So we've got some ultra-processed foods that are higher in sugar, saturated fat, salt, lower nutrient density. But then we have others that actually can be a good nutritional choice sometimes. So for example, fortified plant-based milks, even things like baked beans, things like wholemeal bread, some of the plant-based meat alternatives. So things that can actually provide nutrition. So I think it's really important that we know that we need to reduce our ultra-processed food intake all in all, but really we need to focus on kind of reducing the ones that have that low nutrient density. And when we start to think about it like that, it kind of like brings down the fear-mongering a little bit that, okay, we must only eat whole foods because, you know, we've got to be realistic as well. It would be pretty difficult for us to eliminate all ultra-processed foods in our diet. So it's about thinking, where can we make those practical changes that can reduce our UPF intake, but can also improve the nutritional quality of the diet?
That's really interesting. So a lot of it, I guess, comes down to education, not only when you're making the choices of looking at your plate, right, have I got my carbs, my healthy fats, my protein, but you're also thinking within those, you know, what are the higher quality potentially processed meats that I've got there, which are the best options for me. And that's why, you know, people like you are so valuable in coming on shows like this where we can kind of spread the word. In terms of the nutrient sort of deficiencies that we think are potentially widespread, what are some of the most common deficiencies you're seeing in your line of work?
Yeah, so a really common one is vitamin D deficiency. So around 20% of the British population are deficient in vitamin D, and around 60% are insufficient. So it means that they're not quite at the levels of deficiency, but they still don't quite have enough. And vitamin D is linked to all sorts of aspects of our health. And vitamin D is the only essential nutrient that we can't get sufficient amounts of from food. And this is why we have the public health guidance that in winter months, we need to take a vitamin D supplement because so we can get small amounts from food, but we can actually synthesize it from sunshine, but we can only do that in the spring and the summer months. So that's one thing to be aware of. Another common one is iron deficiency anemia. And we see this in particular with women of childbearing age. And, we see iron losses each month when it comes to menstrual cycles. And also, actually, our iron intake in our diet often isn't quite where we need it to be. So that's a common one. And then, we've seen over the past kind of like decade or so a real increase in the following of plant-based diets. So then there can be nutrient deficiencies that can be associated with that. So an example is something like vitamin B12. So vitamin B12 is only found naturally in animal products. So some foods are fortified with vitamin B12, which means that it's added, such as say like the plant-based milks, the fortified plant-based milks that I mentioned before. But actually, if you're vegan, really you need to be thinking about taking a supplement. And it's difficult because sometimes with a vitamin B12 deficiency, you can feel it, you feel exhausted, you feel fatigued, but actually most people in 2025 probably feel a bit exhausted. So people put it down to, oh, I'm really busy at work or, anything like that. So a lot of people may not know that they have something like a vitamin B12 deficiency, and it can lead to issues later on in life. And this is the thing with nutrient deficiencies. Sometimes they just they lay there for a long time, and then the consequences can come decades later, which is why it's an important thing if we can be aware of, what our nutritional status is.
Wow, that's so interesting. And I think that obviously also links to fertility. People who are younger thinking, well, that's way off for me. Perhaps the decisions you're making now might impact you later or help you and support your body. I think also you see this sometimes in people who go through a drastic change. I did this about 6 or 7 years ago where I wasn't healthy and I was eating a lot of sugar and carbs and drinking. And then I went overnight, really just cut out dairy, cut out gluten, cut out most animal products, meat, and then feeling great initially, because obviously when you eliminate, some of these ultra processed foods or sugars, you're going to feel great. But actually over time, realized I was cutting out, quite a lot of stuff that actually I probably needed and wasn't doing my research. And I think a lot of people just experiment a lot at home with, I'm just going to try cutting out gluten with no evidence as to whether it's actually affecting me, or, I'm going to go vegan like that without actually having the sort of support in place that you need. I made that mistake and I started feeling more and more ill and exhausted. And it hasn't been until I've really looked at my diet and actually over the years supplemented and had meat again. I think that's where it's sort of balanced out. So do you think it can be a bit drastic for some people when you're seeing maybe these little tidbits of information on social media and you want to do a drastic change, but perhaps you don't know exactly what you're doing?
Yeah, and how much do we see on social media? A lot. And, you can see something that may resonate with you. And then so one person has tried this and it's helped them in this way. But the thing is, we are all so different. And that's one thing, a lot of people turn to social media for advice and for health advice now. And, in some respects, it can be great. It can be a good tool. But that's really when you're following healthcare professionals, people who are registered and qualified to be giving such information. But a lot of people can follow just random people because they're going on a particular journey. That's when it can become dangerous. But I mean, having said that, you can get some rogue healthcare professionals, which makes it a really complicated web to kind of figure your way around.
And some of the more reasonable comments I've heard is that sometimes things aren't as black and white as you think, and foods aren't just, some foods aren't just protein, they're also got fiber and protein, and they're complex. And I think labeling some foods, this is just protein, this is just fiber, or this is black and white, good or bad for you, seed oils, things like this. I think actually sometimes you realize that sometimes the truth is a bit more of a gray area or somewhere in the middle, and it's not so black and white. And I think social media has a tendency to, the clips that go the most viral are often the ones which are the most controversial.
Oh, for sure. And to be honest, that's why some people do it. They want the controversial nature. then it kind of like, it gets the comments, it gets the shares, it kind of like builds this traction, and then it brings more people to them. So some people want that over actually sharing the right messages.
I guess you want a black and white answer sometimes, because you want to be making the right choices for yourself. If we go back to some of those common deficiencies, vitamin D, the jury's out a little bit with how much you should be taking. What would you advise for someone who maybe has slightly under, if they're coming up on their blood test, maybe they need a bit of supplementation, or their kind of average levels of vitamin D?
So public health recommendations are to take 10 micrograms of vitamin D, as I say, once a day over those winter months. Now, when you have a deficiency, that's when you need to take a little bit more. And sometimes, if you are deficient, you should be doing this ideally alongside a healthcare professional. So if you're doing it alongside your doctor or a dietitian, then they can give you, an indication as to what that dose may be. But common doses that people may supplement with are 25 micrograms. It could potentially be 50. The safe upper limit is 100. So really, ideally, unless there's a medical reason for going above that, we shouldn't necessarily go above that. So that's something to bear in mind. And it comes about when, say in fertility, for example, when people are taking multiple supplements, they can sometimes go above where these thresholds lie. So that's something to be aware of as well.
That's really interesting, because I think a lot of women take a prenatal, which is great. You've got the folic acid in there, you've got everything, but you probably don't need, unless it's the prenatal is missing something specific, you probably don't also need vitamin D or something on top of it.
Yeah, unless you've got a deficiency or your levels are low, then the prenatal supplement will cover you. Most prenatals have between 10 and 25 micrograms. So that will cover most people. But it is a really good idea, certainly if people are dealing with infertility, to get certain blood tests or bloods checked, one of which being vitamin D, because low levels of vitamin D are associated with poorer outcomes. Low vitamin D are associated with higher miscarriage rates. So there are associations, but the good news with it is it's really easy to fix.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Really easy.
I saw a clip where you said about eating less doesn't always lead to weight loss. Do you think with weight loss there are other things that you could be doing instead of just cutting down?
And this is what we've kind of been accustomed to believe, in that it's about restriction, it's about cutting down. But how we're starting to present this in more recent years is thinking about things that you can include as opposed to things that you have to exclude. So nutrients such as protein and fibre in particular, they're two really, really important things to include in the diet. And certainly, I hear people say it with protein all the time, and it's backed up by the evidence. It just really, really improves feelings of satiety. It makes you feel full at the end of your meal, or even before the end of your meal. And that feeling of fullness is sustained, so which can lead to less snacking, etc. Similarly with fibre, has similar effects. Whereas if you're just eating low nutrient foods and then you just cut them down to reach the calories that you want to be at, you're not going to feel full at all. And then it will lead to cravings. And then so you might be able to do this for a short period of time, but ultimately it's not going to be successful. So it is really thinking not just about that exclusion, but bringing the inclusion into it. And just even with that mindset of inclusion, kind of like health and wellness and putting the good things in, as opposed to diet culture and exclusion. It's just a better way forward.
It's so toxic, isn't it? And it's frightening to think if you're already on a low nutrient diet, then removing even more calories to be on an even less nutrient-rich diet.
Exactly.
The effects we know on bone health, for women, that can be significant. I don't know what your thoughts are on these sort of yo-yo weight loss, because there have been books and studies that have come out to suggest that your base level weight goes up each time you go through this starvation period. If you're not getting nutrients, that perhaps you go on a really restrictive diet, your body goes in starvation mode and is like, right, next time you feed me, I've got to really use those nutrients that you've given me, and the base weight goes up. Do you think there's evidence for that?
I think there is. And sadly, in terms of yo-yo dieting, it doesn't just go up, down, up, down, up, down. Each time it goes up, it tends to go a little bit more up. And I have real empathy for people who go through this, because it's really tough. Dieting in inverted commas, or, trying to lose weight and making these big changes to your lifestyle. It doesn't just affect you at mealtime. It affects your whole day, then your whole week, then the whole time that you're doing this. And then to not be able to sustain those results, and then for it to go back to where it was and beyond that, it's really, really tough. So it is about really not thinking about these short-term poor nutrient fixes. It's thinking about like the long game, and often like a steadier approach. And I know it can be frustrating as it takes longer to get there, but a steadier approach that you're still going to feel good whilst you're doing it. That is really like ultimately what we're aiming for.
Yeah, I love that. I think the steady approach plus adding in, as you say, adding in those good foods so that you're feeling more nourished and you're feeling full. And I don't know what your breakfast looks like, for instance, but I've been having a protein shake for a long time now with nuts and some chia seeds and berries and dates. I feel great for hours, think about the 90s, and I was a kid in the 90s and 2000s, and the cereals, and unfortunately you still see these cereals on offer in the supermarkets, but pure sugar. And then we'd all crash at 9 a.m. You get to school and start feeling hungry already, and you just be thinking, when's it lunchtime?
I know. And I remember as well, like the Special K diet, where it was like
so toxic.
Special K for breakfast, Special K for lunch, and then an evening meal, and you'll lose weight. Well, yeah, but with those, it's not high in protein. It's not. No. It's got some fibre in, but it's not enough, and it's not as varied as what we need. And then the whole nutritional balance isn't going to be what we need it to be. But I look back sometimes on the things that used to be spouted in the 90s and even in the noughties as well. But weirdly, we just kind of accepted it because it was the norm. And also, what I really hate, and just clips that come up on social media, like in terms of like fat shaming and other things like that, it's horrendous. It's horrendous, and it just wouldn't be tolerated now. So I'm really glad that we're in a much better place than where we are, which is a very positive thing. We've still got some work to do, but it's certainly better.
How does it make you feel walking through supermarkets? Because I feel frustrated, and I'm not a nutritionist or a dietitian, I'm not a doctor. But, it's triggering because you look around and you're like, there is so much unhealthy stuff here. And especially the convenience stores. So the express ones, the small ones, there's like one aisle, like half an aisle with some fruit and veg. The rest is all just crisps, sugary things, fizzy drinks. And it just seems so disproportionate.
I know. But you know what, weirdly, it just kind of like, I don't really go down like those aisles that much if I'm doing like a weekly shop or something like that. But weirdly, it just kind of like, I've just become accustomed to it. I'm just like, oh, that's the norm. But it's weird that that's become the norm, and food manufacturing has become what it has, because, foods have been, and especially these less nutritious UPFs, they've been designed not to give nutrition, yes, to give pleasure, but they've been designed to be highly palatable so that people kind of like want more and more. But actually, in terms of people's health, it does nothing.
No.
And actually, well, it does negative things. So, now the nation is kind of like a little bit more health conscious. Manufacturers, some of them, and I know some manufacturers which I won't name, but those that may be associated with being poorer nutrient qualities, and those that produce UPFs. But I do know behind the scenes that they are actually trying to do a lot to try and make, one, existing products better, but two, create products with higher nutritional value, because they know that there's a market demand for it, but also, our health system and the health of the nation needs it. So hopefully, I would hope that in years to come we do see a change. The only one thing I would say that I see different in some stores, a lot of stores actually now, again, going back to like, when we were kids and going to the supermarket, there'd always be chocolate on the till. That isn't as common now. So that is like one, and it was always at the end when you're there with your mum, oh, Mum, can I have that?
Yeah.
And then she was like, oh, go on. Oh, it's Saturday, go on then.
Yeah.
And then so that has helped. There's some things that have helped, and even the sugar reduction with the sugar levy, and then the sugar reduction in fizzy drinks. So some things have improved, but as we said before, we've got a long way to go.
And with your clients that you work with in terms of meal prepping, we know that home cooking is always best. And to get the nutrients that your body needs on a regular basis, obviously we all have cheat days or days where we're busy and we're picking up things here or there. But your sort of standard days, how long and how much effort do you think people need to put into prepping? Is, say, an hour every single day, is that normal, would you say?
Again, I think that this is really, really personal to that individual and also to that family as well. A lot of people won't have that time. They won't even have an hour. To have an hour to prep food for a lot of people will be a luxury. So it's thinking about how can we work with what we've got? And obviously something like batch cooking and meal prepping for the week ahead, things that we can do like that, it's going to help incredibly. So it's just trying to find, ways in which you can still get the healthy foods in, but that's kind of like going to serve your week in a time efficient way. And that's for people who are time poor. I'm sure you're time poor. I feel time poor. So it's always about trying to find those like time efficient wins. And this is why, I would never demonize somebody for going for something, processed or something that's kind of quick, because it's like, I understand it. So it's like, but when going for those quick options, let's try and get, the best or the highest nutritional quality thing that we can. And there are ways in which that you can get, quick and easy and healthy meals.
And I guess you're experiencing that yourself because you've got your business, and you're working for Simple App. So you've got so much going on. You're seeing clients and working for the AI company. So how are you, I'm just curious, in your life, how long do you spend prepping? What kind of meals are your go-to to be like, right, this is quick, but I know it's gonna be good for me?
Yeah, so I'm one of these people who I think I approach it in quite a strange way, in that I think about like nutrients as well. It's just because I've obviously worked in nutrition for so long. It's kind of like how I assess food and stuff like that. My things that I'm going for at the moment is kind of like throwing all these nice ingredients kind of like into a pan. So veggie omelets, so lots of different types of vegetables, but even putting things like garlic in, putting things like herbs in, because these have additional phytochemicals, they have additional antioxidants as well, prebiotics. And then obviously like with the eggs, you're getting something, again, that protein that we spoke about being just so important. I put quite often like a dollop of like Greek yogurt on things as well, and you'd be really, really surprised how many things Greek yogurts go with. So that's kind of, and again, so like a lunch like that can be done in less than 10 minutes. Less than 10 minutes, so super easy. And then another thing that I did that was really quick and easy this week was, again, a veggie mix. I had some tinned mackerel in the cupboard as well. Put that in and made like a fish and veggie mash. I had a little like Spanish tortilla, so like a potato and egg kind of like tortilla, having those. And again, that was probably done because the tortilla was pre-prepared, again, under 10 minutes. So I do need things that are kind of like quick, efficient, but I feel good because I've got my nutrients in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are little hacks like this, like frozen vegetables that you can chuck into a curry or a stir fry. That saves a bit of time. Tinned fish is having a real moment.
Oh, it is. I absolutely love it. And funnily enough, so I became vegetarian when I was 8.
Wow,
so I've been
I
know. So I've been vegetarian for a really long time. And I kind of like, I did it for like the reason of animals, like when I was young. And then I started to study nutrition. And then I kind of said to myself that if I felt that my health was lacking in any way, I would consider introducing meat or fish. And then I, just in terms of like inflammation, I just didn't feel that I had, because I was taking omega-3 supplements and I was like, I feel that I could maybe be getting like more of this from my diet. So I did introduce it a few years ago, and for me personally, it's actually been a really good move. So getting omega-3 from the diet, but things like, you know, vitamin B12 that I had less of, iodine, things like that. So
iodine is in fish. Interesting.
Yeah, and again, you know, when people are plant-based eaters, it's something that they can be, iodine is something that they can be deficient in. It's
such a minefield, isn't it, with nutrients, because, you know, in one sense, you might go plant-based or have a lot of plants in your diet, but we are being told that the soil is now not rich enough in minerals. So then you're like, okay, do I need to supplement for, I know a lot of people supplement for magnesium now, that's very common in the evenings, helps them sleep, relax. But when you hear things like iodine, and there are others, right, where you think, do I need to supplement? Do I need to be taking a mineral-based supplement? You know, how depleted are the soils now?
I think that we can begin to worry about everything. To be honest, with things like that, I would say, you know, not to worry too much. Stick to that public health guidance, you know, going for your at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables. There's obviously that wider recommendation as well of the 30 plants per week as well for your gut health. But, you know, focus on, if that just feels just far too much, just focus on something that is practical and achievable for you. You're still going to get plenty of vitamins and minerals. If you ever feel that your health is lacking, go and get your bloods checked. You know, you can get basic ones done from your GP. You know, sadly, we can't often get a full kind of like nutrition screen, but if you are able to, I quite like to do it once a year, just to go and get some key bloods done to understand if I am low in things. And funnily enough, actually, before I introduced fish and when I wasn't really supplementing B12, I was deficient in vitamin B12 a while ago. But I thought, oh no, I'll probably be fine because I have dairy and I consume eggs, but my levels were low and I didn't know.
And that's what's really interesting. It can really surprise you. And I completely agree. The testing is essential to really know, because you're guessing sometimes and you might get symptoms. And I think it's also shows that it's diet and everything. Health is so individualized.
Yeah.
Me and my husband did a blood test, and we both did a nutritional one. And what's interesting is we're on almost exactly the same diet, and mine was better than his.
Right.
And he was slightly sort of borderline and slightly deficient in things that I wasn't. And I was like, that's so strange, because we're having a really good diet. You know, we're eating very, very similarly. So it's sort of bizarre how, you know, you realize our bodies are so different. We absorb things in different ways.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean that if you're just like trying your best to be healthy, that necessarily you're not deficient in something.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
having the evidence, I think, is really great. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying today's episode, please do subscribe or give it a follow so we can keep giving you excellent content and bringing on amazing guests that hopefully you're loving on the Health Review podcast. Now, back to the show. Before we get into fertility, I'd love to ask you some very quick myth busters that, if you can, have a shortish answer with. Some of them, again, are a bit black and white, so it might be a bit tricky. The first one is about dairy. Lots of people say that dairy is inflammatory and should be avoided as an adult.
Okay, short answer. The research suggests that it has a neutral effect on inflammation. So if somebody has inflammation and they want to follow an anti-inflammatory diet, reducing dairy would not be one of the things that I recommend.
Fruit has too much sugar. You hear people say that sometimes. Grapes, things like that.
Yeah. So yes, fruit contains natural sugar, but it also contains a hell of a lot of nutrients. So vitamins, minerals, fiber, and also fruit is low to medium glycemic index. So it means it's got quite a steady release of that sugar into the bloodstream, which is different to kind of like more refined carbohydrates. So it's a very, very valuable source of nutrients for us. We do not need to exclude it. There are limitations in terms of the guidance. So when we're looking at a portion of fruit is generally around 80 grams. In terms of fruit juice, a portion is 150 ml. So generally we don't want or need to be going above that. And in terms of dried fruit, it's actually 30 grams, because if you think about the dried fruit, like the water's being taken out of it. So you're left with something that's quite highly concentrated in sugar. So there are guidelines around it, but no, we don't want to avoid them. We absolutely want fruit to play a part in our diet.
That's great. Gluten should be avoided. Lots of people go gluten-free now.
Yeah, so In celiac disease, so celiac disease is an autoimmune condition whereby gluten can trigger an immune response. And it's basically where the body attacks its own cells in the intestine. So for this, you need to follow a gluten-free diet. So if you have celiac disease, there's no choice, sadly, but to follow this gluten-free diet. For the general population, we don't need to follow a gluten-free diet. There may be some people who have a sensitivity to gluten, and it can manifest in a number of different ways. It can be in skin health. Some people feel that their PCOS symptoms can worsen. Gluten could potentially be a trigger for pain in people with endometriosis. So as much as we say that the general population doesn't need to follow a gluten-free diet, I always have open ears because I know it can give some people with a sensitivity symptoms. So if somebody comes to me and says, I do really think that this is a trigger for me, we look into it.
Yeah.
So I think we can't have closed ears and closed conversations. We need to be open to assessing, but for the majority of people, gluten is fine.
And I guess for some people also it can be to do with your gut bacteria and how you respond, which again is it's not new, but like the evidence is new and the research is new and it's all kind of unfolding. So we don't necessarily know, how someone's gut bacteria might work with gluten than others. And so it's really interesting. I guess it's kind of a spectrum, isn't it, with gluten? Yeah,
I think so. It's certainly, it's an interesting one, but we don't want to kind of like fearmonger across the board. So for the general population, it seems to be okay.
I hear of people having gluten in the evenings because it helps them sleep, which is quite a nice little hack. If it does make you a little bit tired.
See, well, this is where it gets interesting because people associate, if they're having bread or they're having, like carbohydrates, then, they'll think about the gluten. But it could be the carbohydrate load that they're having that's making them feel sleepy.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this is it. When we were saying before about, like protein, but it's actually got all of these nutrients. There's so many things going on. So that's why I've got to be careful not to think, it's just this one part of thing. It's just this one part of that gives me this effect.
That's a good point. Also, this one, I guess, merits a longer answer sometimes, depending on your opinion. But seed oils, lots of people say, don't touch them. Other people say they're fine in moderation. What do you think?
So our vegetable oil that we see on the shelves is rapeseed oil. So seed oil has just been quite a reasonable part of our diet. I would not avoid them. So you can look at it in a few different contexts. So firstly, seed oil, such as rapeseed oil, is an unsaturated fat. We know that unsaturated fats have better outcomes on heart health than saturated fats that we find in our animal products. So in terms of health guidelines, for heart health, for general health, the advice is to eat more unsaturated fats than saturated. So that's one thing. Also, then it's thinking about where are these seed oils? So if we're using vegetable oil to cook our food and we're cooking healthy food, it's probably likely to be a pretty healthy meal. But also, these vegetable oils can be used to fry food, or they can be used in cookies and crisps and things like that. So when we have an association with like seed oils and like poorer health, it's because it's in a lot of UPFs as well. So it's really thinking about kind of like the wider context. But then another important thing to consider as well is so seed oils can be higher in kind of like omega-6. So we also, just in terms of kind of like our fat balance, we want to ensure that we're having plenty of omega-3s. And this can be something that is low in Western diets. So we get our omega-3, and especially the long chain fatty acids, the ones that we want, we get these in oily fish. So really, everybody should be aiming for 1 to 2 portions of oily fish per week. If they don't have that, we should be looking at supplements. So you can have fish oil supplements, or you can have plant-based supplements from algae. So yeah, there's a few different things going on, but yeah, it really, really has blown up. I think it's like blown up more in the States, and then we've kind of like, because obviously we're all connected via social media, and then that's kind of like come over our way a little bit. I mean, things may be a little bit different in the States in terms of their processing may be a little bit more, a little bit stronger, and those fats may be oxidized, And there could be potentially poorer, kind of like outcomes there. When we're talking about the UK, generally, within the context that I've said, I don't have big concerns.
That's good to know. And I think it's reassuring, because sometimes you can go down these rabbit holes where you start worrying. And, even if you can be in a health food shop and you're picking up, looking at the ingredients, you're seeing rapeseed oil and you're thinking, oh no, what do I do now?
Yeah.
My coconut milk,
Yeah.
that's got oils in it. What do I do? And even to put that even further, I recently got like an air quality monitor, because I live in an area in East London where there's a lot of development, and I was curious to find out, how that is affecting our indoor air quality. And it's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah.
But one of the things I have found is cooking with olive oil, which has a lower smoke point. I am getting alerts for formaldehyde on this air quality monitor. Now, obviously, no one freak out, because this is just my process and what I've been seeing recently. So I've been trying avocado oil, which some people say is a bit better in terms of... There is so much out there. And I think actually sometimes when you dive too far into it, like I have with the air quality monitor, you can start thinking, oh no, like, is anything I'm doing right?
Exactly.
And, why am I stressing myself out with all of this knowledge? So I feel like there's a bit of a balance with like education, but then also not trying to live in perfect conditions, because that's just not possible.
Exactly. And I'm sure with your air quality monitor, like, you probably wouldn't want to be living in London.
Exactly. I think that it's actually, maybe it's an interesting point. Maybe I should go and live in the countryside, have some clean air. I would love to get into the fertility side of things, because I know this is a real topic for you. Can you tell us your credentials and what you're doing with your fertility business?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose like nutrition credentials. So, my first degree was food science and nutrition. I then went to go on to study dietetics, postgraduate, qualified me as a dietitian. I've got a master's in advanced nutrition, a master's in clinical research. And then in terms of the fertility sphere, I'm the chair of the Women's Health and Fertility Group of the BDA, which is the British Dietetic Association. I've got a book that's called Deliciously Healthy Fertility. I've got my online platform, which is called Fertility Dietitian UK, and we basically support women, men and couples on their journey to conception and beyond using evidence-based nutrition strategies. I mean, I've won a couple of awards in the fertility space, but I'm just like, I'm a real advocate for it, because I just know the power of nutrition when it comes to fertility. And I feel that it's only recent years when it's starting to get the airtime. Everybody's always like, oh, okay, yeah, you eat well, you live well. We need to do that as a foundation, but it goes deeper than that. It goes beyond that. And for me, as like really fundamentally a nerdy science geek, like, to be able to apply that to a real life situation and then get incredible outcomes is incredibly fulfilling. And then I train other healthcare professionals as well on fertility nutrition. So then, they're doing it. So yeah, it's an amazing field. It's ever emerging. There's more research coming out more and more. And I feel like really privileged that I get to play a part.
What's amazing is, the research, yes, it's coming out more and more, really interesting every week. If you're across the studies, which I'm doing like a newsletter for the Health Review. So every week I'm seeing some of these results that are being published. And it is truly fascinating, from things like vaginal microbiome and diets and how that, the ultra processed foods. But at the same time, infertility is rising. So we're getting this increase in knowledge, but we're getting a decline in fertility. And that's probably because of, our modern stressful lives, broken sleep, chemicals. It's not just the diet. There are other things at play here, clearly. So in terms of the diet side of things, we know that there is a lot you can do. People with PCOS, endometriosis, I guess those are two of the most common conditions that can affect fertility for women. What diets are best, for your clients? What results have you seen, sort of the best results?
Yeah, and I think it spans much further than that. So we've got, people who have health conditions that influence fertility, such as PCOS, such as endometriosis. Even untreated or unmanaged celiac disease has an influence on fertility. Diabetes that's uncontrolled can have an impact on fertility. So we've got all that with the health conditions, but even people who don't have health conditions, they can experience infertility. And I think one of the things, we mentioned about kind of like the poorer diets and, the kind of like the pollutants and, in our environment and what's going on. But I think an important thing that's happening here is we as a nation are having children much later. and we know that fertility declines as we age. So this is one of the biggest things that we're seeing. But in terms of, a diet and where people start, when we're looking at fertility in general, a Mediterranean diet is just a really, really good place to start. It's anti-inflammatory, it's full of antioxidants, and it's just got basically all of the food groups and a lot of the nutrients that we want and need that has kind of like been proven to have beneficial outcomes for people on a fertility journey. And the useful thing is we see positive effects in both men and women. So it's like people can kind of like, we can do it together. So what we really want to move away from is the Western style diet towards that more Mediterranean style diet.
And for anyone who's not sure, I think a lot of us know now some of the ingredients and foods that are in the Mediterranean diet, but what are some of them you could add in perhaps?
Yeah. So if we look at the Mediterranean style diet, so again, starting with fruit and veg. So again, at least 5 portions of fruit and vegetables. We're looking for different colours as well, because it means different nutrients, different antioxidants, different polyphenols. So then we also want legumes as well. So things like chickpeas, beans, lentils, things like that. We want whole grains. We want healthy fats. So things like olive oil, things like oily fish, which contain our omega-3s, nuts and seeds. And we want to have much lower intakes when you compare to the Western diet of sugar, so added sugar. And also things like red and processed meats.
Yeah, and I think it is doable, right, in the Western world. All of these foods are available. It's not like you have to go to the Mediterranean to experience them.
It's very true. It's very true. And I guess, again, everyone is different. And some people, especially if they're on a fertility journey and they're struggling, they're kind of like all in. We're like, right, well, let's change everything and go. If you're thinking about maybe like trying to conceive in coming years or coming months, and you're like, actually, that just seems like far too big a task for me to change from this to this. So do it gradually. Think about if you were to make one change this month out of all those things that I just mentioned, is it the fruit and veg? Is it that aspect? So try to, even if you're 2 a day at the moment, can you aim for 4? And then building it up to 5. So it's just thinking about those realistic steps and changes that you can make. Because really, all in all, we know that following a fertility promoting diet and just good nutrition in general can increase the chances of people getting pregnant and reducing the time it takes to get there.
In terms of supplements, obviously the fertility supplement market's booming. There's a lot of options out there.
Yeah.
We know that folic acid, there is real evidence for that. That's on the, if you're in England, the NHS guidelines, that you should be taking folic acid when you're conceiving and when you're pregnant. But there are others like CoQ10.
Yeah.
Obviously omega-3 you've already mentioned.
Yeah.
What are the best supplements you should take if you're on the fertility journey, you're about to start, or you're not conceiving yet and you need to start paying attention to what you're doing?
Yeah. So in terms of public health guidance, as you said, we've got the 400 micrograms of folic acid that should be taken 3 months before conception, if possible, and then up to at least the 12th week of pregnancy. The other public health recommendation is vitamin D. And the public health recommendation is kind of like in winter months. But actually, when you're trying to conceive, if you want to take that all year round, absolutely fine to do. Then when people come to see us, they generally are experiencing infertility, so they're having difficulty in getting pregnant. With women, I tend to put all women on a prenatal supplement. And the reason why is because the evidence around these supplements, their use is associated with better outcomes. So similar to what I said before in terms of like the success rate of conception and then what we term live birth, they're increased for people who take supplements. Oxidative stress can play a role in reduced fertility, and antioxidants are one of those things that can help to reduce that and improve outcomes. So improve egg health for the woman, improve sperm health for the man. Obviously, we want to be getting plenty of antioxidants from the diet, but also in your high quality prenatals, you'll have the key antioxidants that we want. So that can just help a little bit more. And also, I know even as a dietitian, I can confidently say my diet is unlikely to be nutritionally complete. It's so difficult when you think about all of the essential vitamins and minerals they are to try and get these in every day. It is difficult. So actually, I feel that these supplements as well can help to plug gaps. So generally speaking, they are things as baseline. So in terms of the other things that you recommended, so for omega-3, if people aren't having their 1 to 2 portions of oily fish per week, then we definitely would include then an omega-3 supplement. In terms of coenzyme Q10, basically what it is, it's an antioxidant. So I mentioned oxidative stress before. Coenzyme Q10 is kind of a key antioxidant that can help that. But the interesting thing is we have coenzyme Q10 like in our body, and as we age, say with women, as we age, the levels of coenzyme Q10 that we store, that we have, it reduces. So actually for women above the age of 35, it can be a really good supplement to take for egg quality.
So is CoQ10, is it like the energy in your cells or something? Because I heard someone mention it and they said actually it can be really good for energy.
So it can, full disclosure, I've frozen my eggs. So I took coenzyme Q10. I didn't feel any difference in energy levels whatsoever. It plays a role in kind of like cell metabolism. But I think in terms of like the actual effects of it, I personally don't think that you feel that. The main role really is in terms of its kind of like antioxidant nature, but also, like supporting cellular function. But as I said, previously it was around, okay, if you're over 35, then you should consider taking this. But actually there's research now in women that are younger than 35 that it could still have positive outcomes. So there was a systematic review, I think it was in 2024, I think it was last year, and this review looked at the different antioxidant supplements and their effect on IVF, of which there are many, and basically the coenzyme Q10 came out as the top one. So if we're looking for an antioxidant to support egg quality, that is the one that I tend to recommend, because you can over supplement. As we said before, with safe upper limits, you can over supplement when it comes to antioxidants, because you've got oxidative stress when you've got the damage, then you've got the antioxidants that can come in and basically neutralize that effect. But if you have too many antioxidants, it can lead to reductive stress, which actually can cause just as much damage as oxidative stress.
Wow.
Exactly. So again, this is where you have to be really, really careful with supplementation.
And is CoQ10 quite common in prenatal supplements? Is that one of the ingredients you might find?
So in some of them, yes, there may be around 25 milligrams. Generally, when people take standalone coenzyme Q10 supplements, the doses tend to be a little bit higher, say 200 to 300 milligrams. But again, there was some research that came out, I think it was in that same paper actually, to say that lower levels, such as 30 milligrams, can actually have a really positive effect. So it may be actually that you just want to stick with a good prenatal.
Obviously, you're Chief Nutrition Officer at Simple App, as we've mentioned. So I'm guessing you are thinking about tech, AI, how that can improve our health. What's your view on using the apps that track your cycles, can help you in terms of learning about your cycle?
I think it's such an incredible tool, because I think when we were at school and when we were younger, we were just taught like how not to get pregnant. Like that was the thing. That was the main thing. Nothing else mattered. But actually, I think, as women, as we get older, I think it's a really powerful thing to then understand your cycle better. So from a fertility point of view, firstly, you can understand where your fertile window is. When we were at school, nobody told us that. Nobody told us. People are learning in their 20s and their 30s.
You just thought you could get pregnant at any moment.
Exactly. So when we're kind of like armed with this, because for some people, you don't know until you're told. So for some people who are, struggling with infertility, it could be that they're actually not having intercourse at the right time of the month. So that is really empowering, or just, important for that. But also it gives us a really good indication of just like what's going on in our body. And I think it can actually allow us to like be kinder to ourselves and have greater understandings for why we may be a certain way at a particular time in the month. But also you can kind of use it as an opportunity. So generally in your follicular phase, which is kind of like as your cycle starts. So the cycle starts on day 1, which is when your period is. And then in a 28-day normal cycle, you'll have ovulation on day 14. So basically in the run up to ovulation, this is kind of like, when we're in our prime, we're booming, everything is good. So, from like a workout perspective, people are like, right, okay, I'm going to like up my workouts. I'm going to like, go for my PBs, etc. within this phase. But then in the luteal phase, and especially in kind of like the week before somebody's period, this is when some people can suffer from PMS, so premenstrual syndrome. Our calorie requirements are generally a little bit higher. We're a bit more snacky. And it's kind of like, it's just saying that's okay.
Yeah.
If I'm going to have a little bit extra here, like, okay, there's a biological reason for this. So, it's just kind of like having empathy, and kind of like understanding, just for kind of like yourself and what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with that so much. I think knowing and like utilizing it. So maybe like people go out more when they're in their follicular phase, more of a chill week when they're PMSing, having those snacks. Like I have some dark chocolate, the Hue ones are so good with the nut butter inside, but actually does have, a fair amount of sugar. And I notice on the PMS days, I'm reaching for that chocolate more and I'm having more squares and less control. And I think when you realize, it's hormones affecting, how I'm thinking, like you don't need to worry about it so much and it's normal.
That's it. And I don't think, we don't need to demonize ourselves for doing this. And as much as we've been talking about, like good nutrition, it's really, really important to say about, we need balance. And for the most part, going for an 80-20, eating well and living well 80% of the time, and then, allowing yourself some of like those less nutritious things, or having, sedentary days where we just want to relax, or, it might be 90-10, maybe a better split for you. But like the most important thing is like, we're not aiming for perfection. Like perfection can actually be unhealthy in some ways. So allowing yourself that balance, it really does you the wonder of good.
I feel like this has been such a masterclass for me, Ro. Thank you so much for coming on. I would love to pick your brains like all day because you have so much knowledge, so much experience. So it's been amazing to have you on the show. For anyone who would like to speak to you about dietary, nutrition related issues, fertility, where can they find you?
So on Instagram is probably the best place. So you can find me at Dietitian Ro. And if you're interested in the fertility side of things, that's at fertility.dietitian.uk. And if you're interested in the AI weight loss coaching side of things, we can be found at simple.life.
Lovely, Ro.
And that's our web address.
Oh, amazing. I'm going to check it out. It's very cool.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Thank you so much, Ro. Thank you for coming on the Health Review. It's been amazing to chat.
Oh, thank you for having me.